Hello, dear friends. In this video, I want to share with you a very important aspect of family relationships, emotional intimacy. I believe this is the most important thing there is. Even the fulfillment of the need to feel needed, important, significant, or sharing daily life together, having a conflict-free relationship, or perfect sex, all of that is nothing compared to emotional intimacy. If there is no emotional intimacy, then if any of the things I mentioned suddenly change with your partner, or if those actions themselves change, without emotional intimacy, the couple falls apart. And you can look back at your past relationships and you'll realize that emotional intimacy would have played a very important role in keeping those relationships from breaking up, in allowing you to continue together. Those are past relationships. If you're currently in a relationship, then what you're about to hear will definitely benefit you. And if you even write it down, that would be absolutely great. I've written it down, made some notes for you. I'll be glancing over here from time to time so that everything is structured, so it's not just a pointless conversation about emotional intimacy, and that's it. We're going to explore it. What is emotional intimacy? It's a state of openness, a state of trust, it's acceptance. Of course, there are many other aspects here too. It's attraction, it's being drawn to a person. Acceptance means taking a person as they are. You accept your partner, and ideally your partner should accept you as well. That's it. Where does emotional intimacy show up? It shows up in friendship. There can be emotional intimacy between girlfriends, between friends. She seems to be between us, yes, but if you look closely, there is nothing between us. Empty, that's it. Emotional intimacy is a state in one person, a state in another person. Sometimes in a couple, one person has emotional intimacy while the other does not. One person is really trying to preserve and strengthen the relationship, to improve it, to add something new. And the other is like, oh, well, I'm fine as it is. I'll go work or just sit and play or talk to my mom or go have some fun, do my hobbies and so on. This is what destroys emotional intimacy. So one seems to be making an effort while the other is not. Where will this lead? I'll explain further. Naturally, this will lead to the destruction of emotional intimacy, to the distancing of this partner and the distancing of that partner. And when relationships go in different directions like this, it's already difficult to do anything about them, but actually something can be done. I'll tell you what recommendations I have. So, emotional intimacy is all right, and who else can have emotional intimacy? Between lovers, obviously, between people in romantic relationships, between parents and children, between grandparents and children, and even between children themselves, there can be emotional intimacy. There are quarrels, conflicts, and arguments that these children create when there is no emotional intimacy. Also, take a look at your own life. With whom do you have it, and with whom do you not? What prevents the formation of emotional intimacy? The first thing that gets in the way is personal fears. That is, if you have personal fears, you may develop emotional attachment, but not emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy is not the same as emotional attachment. Let me explain what intimacy is. Emotional intimacy means that you are drawn to each other, you feel good together, you enjoy each other's company, you even think about each other. Maybe you even think about each other every hour. You feel good, you are drawn to one another. But emotional attachment is when you constantly need this person, you can't imagine your life without them. Whereas with emotional intimacy, I can see my own life. I can work, and at the same time I think about you. At the same time I'm working, and I feel good, knowing that when I come to you we'll experience this emotional closeness, the pleasure of emotional intimacy. In emotional intimacy, there is passion, but not obsessiveness, because in emotional fusion or emotional attachment, there's this, an actual hunger. I want it faster, I want to satisfy this hunger quickly, it makes me anxious. There are manipulations in emotional attachment, but in emotional intimacy, there are none. There are resentments and disappointments in emotional attachment, but in emotional intimacy there are none. I'll explain why in a moment. What gets in the way of emotional intimacy? As I said, it's personal fears. For example, the fear of loneliness, what can it lead to? To emotional attachment, but that is not emotional intimacy. There is a presence of emotional intimacy within emotional attachment, but the mechanisms are different. Attachment involves suffering, whereas in emotional intimacy there is no suffering. That is, I give the other person freedom and I want freedom for myself. To recharge somewhere, so to speak. Just to go off and spend time with friends, with whom there is also emotional intimacy. Or to be alone, because there are no friends and I don't want emotional intimacy with anyone except you. Because this emotional intimacy also implies friendship. In other words, there should be friendship. We should have some shared interests. We should be interested in each other. We should listen to each other, just like you listen to a friend. You sit down and listen, yes, and you get into all the details, you ask questions. But how is it with your partner? Do you ask? Do you listen to what's going on? You listen, but it's more like, whoa, what's up, huh? Ah. and then you go back to doing your own thing. And many men avoid even having serious conversations at all. Or you say, oh, that's nonsense. Whatever's going on at your work is trivial. You wouldn't do that with your friends, would you? You have emotional closeness with your children or your parents. You listen to them, but with your partner, you don't. This destroys emotional intimacy. Let's go back. Fears, various fears related to relationships. What kind? For example, the fear of distrust, right? Because there was infidelity before, or there was flirting, and now I don't trust this person. Does this get in the way of forming emotional intimacy? Of course it does. I don't open up. I'm suspicious. I keep asking where, what, how, why. I forbid things. I restrict the person. I devalue them. So this not creates, but prevents the formation of emotional intimacy. There are also various family scenarios. For example, a cold man enters into a relationship with a warm, vibrant, lively, gentle woman. The man doesn't want any intimacy with her, doesn't want hugs, he doesn't care, he doesn't want to give compliments, because his parents were like that. He doesn't give gifts, doesn't bring flowers, but she wants that. Forms this emotional closeness in him. He doesn't have it. He just works. He comes home, he provides for her. There used to be a Telegram channel. Well, a channel on Telegram. Why do I keep calling it a TV channel? To me, it really feels like a TV channel. I go live there. So there, together with Juliana, my colleague in male-female relationships, the link to the channel will be below. Come join and subscribe. At that time, we were doing a case review, analyzing someone's situation. You can also come with your own situation and take part. It's absolutely free. Every other Wednesday, we analyze situations. So the man was saying, what does she want? What does she want? I provide for her. She goes out and buys whatever she wants. Now she drives a car. We go on vacation 2 or 3 times a year somewhere. She has everything. What complaints does she have? She needs attention, more attention. One could ask, what kind of attention or what other kind of attention? I have to work a lot. That's understandable. Here, you also have to take women into account. You have to consider them. In general, all of this, of course, gets clarified during consultations. But the most important aspect here is that the man doesn't know what her emotional needs are. A partner's lack of knowledge about the other partner's emotional needs leads to the destruction or dissatisfaction of those needs. When you do know, it leads to the destruction of the remaining emotional intimacy. You can run a test. Today, I will tell you everything that creates emotional intimacy and what destroys it. And this will be 100% about the presence of emotional intimacy. So, how much emotional intimacy is there in your last relationship or in your current one? 100% is what I will describe, and your percentage will depend on your own analysis. That is, when you provide for your family, provide everything necessary, everything is great, wonderful. Or for example, a man needs sex. She went, gave him everything, participated, but didn't show any interest in how it went for him. She doesn't satisfy his other emotional needs. A man just needs sex. She came to that conclusion and that's it. But it's not just about sex. The family scenario, as I said, is that there's a cold partner and a warm partner. It can also be the other way around. The woman can be cold or warm. There's a scenario where my needs are met, and I don't care whether yours are met or not. I've come across some very strange relationships like that. Or when it's all about me, mine. I want things for myself, maybe a little for you, but the rest is all for me. Girls sometimes do that. So as a man, you're supposed to do this and that and that. And what am I supposed to do? Well, just give sex because that's what mom did, or, that's what dad did. This is a family scenario. In other words, we repeat the family scenario. Take a close look at your own relationships. Are you repeating it? The lack of communication skills. This is more common among men. When they don't want to talk, they leave or say, oh, whatever. Or I was just recently talking to a girl, and she told me about a situation where she tries to tell her man something important, and he starts describing to her what he sees around him. Well, for example, like, here's a window, here's a door, here's a pane of glass, here's a board, that's it. So basically, he just interrupts her, while inside she's burning up, hurting, and she can't express any of it. What did this lead to? To a breakup. Because emotional intimacy gets less and less and less. What else? Expectation. Naturally, when we enter a relationship, we create in our minds a certain image of the person we want. There is a real person in front of us. Here we have an unreal object, it is almost a copy of it. But this abstract image is endowed with qualities that the real person doesn't actually have. And accordingly, we expect something from these qualities. Because we also have, let's say, other parts of our psyche that are in need. They want to receive attention, tenderness, affection, care, compliments, flowers, gifts, and so on and so forth. Respect and everything else. The emotional needs. And based on the fact that we have endowed this particular object right here, we take a careful and deliberate look at it. And of course, we absolutely want it to match that exactly. But this is a different person. So when we look through this object, it's like looking through a kind of distorted prism, and we look at this person and say, you're not like that. You should be. In other words, we don't accept them. So what happens next? Disappointment follows. Disappointment and desire to change. We try to change them. First, disappointment sets in because they don't meet our expectations. And then we try to change them. By them, I mean not the object, but the partner, the real partner we want to change. If you don't like them, if your core values or interests are fundamentally different from what you imagined, if there are mismatches, that's it. It's better to end things because you won't be able to change them. People don't really change, they just adapt. Most people just adapt. Of course, some do change. Some change in therapy with psychologists or through self-awareness. When they realize, oh, I didn't know. It turns out that men or women have different emotional needs. Besides sex, besides some kind of care, there's also respect, there's appreciation and gratitude. That's about, when it comes to men, it's all pretty simple. But for women, it's this, that, and the other. The list is longer there. So when it turns out that these things exist, that realization, then a person can change. I didn't know that you needed to find these things out. I didn't know that you had to take action afterwards. I'll explain now. So, emotional intimacy during infatuation. It ends when the infatuation ends because emotional intimacy during infatuation is based on what? On infatuation itself, on that passion, on dopamine, on serotonin dependence. So when this kind of thing happens and then fades away, and it definitely will fade away, it doesn't fade for lovers who live apart for 10 years, 20 years. 19 years is the longest I know of people living as lovers. But here there's infatuation, and here there's infatuation. Between us, obviously, there's nothing. Here and here. Here there's emotional intimacy, and here there's emotional intimacy. So when infatuation fades, like with those people who were in love with each other for 19 years, drawn to each other, and then it finally happened for them, they started living together for 2 weeks. And then he leaves. That's it, the infatuation just disappears completely. He realizes that this isn't the right person, that he can't live with this person in everyday life. That's it. And in just 2 weeks, the infatuation was gone. In reality, disappointment set in, which completely overshadowed that infatuation, and then the person left. He left, and naturally there was suffering, and we worked to remove that suffering. That's why you can't rely on infatuation. Infatuation will pass. Emotional intimacy, that's something else entirely. But infatuation adds a certain passion to emotional intimacy. However, intimacy itself is a separately formed mechanism. A relationship based solely on sex will fall apart if something happens to the sexual aspect. During pregnancy, or simply due to dissatisfaction, or when one partner has had enough, or a partner with low desire says, I don't want to today, I don't want to tomorrow, I don't want to later. Then as soon as this is acknowledged, emotional intimacy collapses. That is, before, we were drawn to each other, we could watch movies together, but now we do all of this separately, because sex is rare or completely absent. Before, we used to go places, socialize, visit acquaintances and friends, but now we don't, because there's no sex, and accordingly, no emotional intimacy. Everything falls apart. Intimacy needs to be restored. But when it is based on everyday life, on shared living space, basically on property like cars, look how much property we have, that's why we're close to each other, that's why we hold on to each other. If something material like shared property, children for example, or marriage, if I live for the sake of marriage, for the sake of the children, is primary, then emotional intimacy will inevitably collapse. Emotional intimacy must always come first. That's what I said at the beginning. If you don't have enough information, go online, please Google it, read up. I think there will be plenty of information about emotional intimacy. It is also called spiritual intimacy. The video will turn out not short, but I hope informative. If emotional intimacy is based on shared interests, on a profession, for example, if we have the same profession, yes, we come home and tell each other about our day, that's also not enough. That's also not enough because career growth, a change of profession, emotional intimacy can disappear. Or for example, maternity leave. Emotional intimacy can disappear. It's very bad when it disappears. Business, for example, a joint business, everything is great, we're partners. Wonderful. But if there are no other interests, nothing else that forms or strengthens emotional intimacy, if I approach the most important thing, what destroys